This is Rowena Dooley asking Sol citizens to report for duty.
And greetings. Welcome back to Soul Citizens. I'm Griffin Gaming RPG. Today is Sunday, September the 15th, and we're back with a great new topic that we have never tackled, that I've been scared of, and we are going to tackle this with probably one of the brightest and most intelligent people among the Soul Citizens. And we're going to introduce you. That is, yeah, I was going to say, fastcart, it's not you. I want you to know that ahead of time. No, but we're gonna talk about that in a minute and give some background. But I want to first of all say thank you guys for being here with us today on Sunday, and also I want to welcome my co-hosts that are here. I will start, since fastcart's already spoken up. I will start with the one and the only fastcart FC. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. I'm fastcart FC. Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Good. Thank you for having you. Oh my God, like you're a guest. and also joining us today is the one and the only JadeStarwatcher. Jade, how are you?
I am fine. Good. And I'm ready for this.
Yeah, good. We have been talking about this. Yeah, we've been talking about this subject for a while. Today's topic, as you guys can see, is the pseudoscience of Star Citizen. And we are going to be delving into the facts and the fiction of the development of this game and its impact on us as players, how we should perceive the impact of the facts and the fiction in this game. And as I said earlier, one of the reasons why I'm really excited about this is that Jade, why don't you, in a roundabout way, kind of let people know why you're kind of our authority on this subject?
Right. So I'm a roundabout authority on this subject because I'm an IRL, real life scientist. I am an astrobiology grad student, and so I geek out on all things space in general, but definitely in Star Citizen, I'm always looking at how it differs from reality, and also the things that they have, got close to reality, or where they actually consulted with like an astrophysicist, which they have done.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why fastcart and I are going to be taking a real back seat to this. And I want to first off give some, I'll probably mention this again at the end of the show, give a tremendous amount of credit to today's show, to Jade. Usually when we do these shows, fastcart and Captain Serious Fun and I talk about the subjects, and then usually I spend some time during the week pulling it together. And as I was starting to do this one, Jade asked if I needed any help. And I'm like, yeah, whatever you want to toss in is fine. And usually Jade will send me 2 or 3 things for me to, see if we can use it or fit it into the show. But I have to give credit this week. I'd probably say 90% of what we're going to be talking about today is from Jade. And it was all great stuff. It was no reason for me to drop anything or add anything. I think that what she submitted are great levels. I asked her to kind of bring in some things that are like, let's say, level basic, like easy kind of stuff for us to all kind of that we can identify with. And then the science is going to kind of increase as we go. So some of the topics are going to be a little bit deeper than others, but they're all probably topics that you guys in some way or other have touched on in the game. And so we're kind of going to do like a fiction and a fact thing. And then fastcart now kind of, we'll take the fiction part because we're both fiction people. Jade's the fact, the fact person today. So that's kind of how this show is going to roll. But let's talk about, first off, what is pseudoscience? Because I think that the phrase has been used in a lot of different ways. And Jade kind of brought a second part to this definition that was in my first part. And when I read it again, I'm like, yeah, I think she's right. We need to put this in because I was going to do a shorter version of this definition. So let's go ahead and take a look at a little bit of this. And let's see if we can find the very first one. What is pseudoscience? Pseudoscience is a term used to describe a field of study or set of ideas that appears to be scientific, but is actually false, misleading, or unproven. Pseudoscience is often presented as if it were science, but it doesn't meet the standards of scientific inquiry. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to let Jade read the other part of this, and I want to first tie this into, I want to do a little disclaimer here. It would be very easy for us as players to think that things that are in a game may be true science when quite often it is not. And there are times when game developers will take elements of things that are from science or theory and incorporate them or incorporate a variation of it, but it doesn't mean that it is true science. And I want to make sure that we know that, because sometimes we'll declare something in a game and think, it's this, that, and the other. It has this physics. And the reality of it is that it really, really doesn't. It may have aspects of it or elements of it, but not the entire thing. Jade, why don't you go ahead and kind of pick up from there?
I will, but I want to put one thing out before we even start on this path is there are also things in the game that are based on theoretical physics. Like our quantum drives are an actual theory called the Alcubierre warp theory, right? Warp metric. So that actually is something that could exist in reality. We just we don't have the technology to do it right now, right? So that's different than pseudoscience, where we're talking about stuff just made up or is not. There's no way to actually have that in our physical world. Let's put it that way. And the definition that you gave, Griff, about what is pseudoscience is great. The definition I'm going to give is why something is pseudoscience. And beyond the lack of empirical evidence or proper methodology, pseudoscience lacks the ability to be tested or falsified. So some examples of that would be like astrology, where, the planets, the positions of the planets affect human behavior, or homeopathy, where you're using something that's super diluted and, people say that it can cure something. That lacks all scientific support. And, with astrology, that is not testable. So if you have an unfalsifiable hypothesis or untestable thing like that, that's really pseudoscience. That's how you can tell the difference between pseudoscience and actual science.
And it brings up the point of the difficulty with it, right? Because there are people who will say that I did something or experienced something, and for them, their experiences make it real. It makes it a fact. But like you said, it can't be proven either way, which makes it difficult. So I want to really kind of amplify. Go ahead. We're going to say something? Go ahead.
I was going to say, and that gets into things like confirmation bias.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And so what we want to do today is we're going to have fun with this. Jade was saying, is it going to be a dry topic? I don't think it will be. I think it's going to be great, because I think anytime we can learn something, it's going to be good for us. And also to dispel any notions that may be what we have, because a lot of us remember in the early days of several games. I remember Elite Dangerous. I remember what was the other one? Not No Man's Sky. Well, in a way, No Man's Sky, but Star Citizen. There was a lot of desire for wanting to see things being done in a very scientific way, and we know that sometimes that there were times when they would try to achieve certain things. Now, maybe Jade will have some insight into this later when we get toward the end of the show. And I wonder what, Jade, you were just saying a second ago, how sometimes there's a quote unquote science that's created, but it's only created to fill in a gap, right? It doesn't mean that it's real. It's just like, it's almost like lore, right? It's something that we build in so that it will make sense for us, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is scientific fact. It's just something that they made up to make it sound good, basically. And sometimes that made up stuff gets tied to something that really is, to Jade's point, something that is scientific theory. But it's just done to fill in the gap. And it can be kind of difficult to discern where that is, especially when lore, which Jade will tell you, when lore is written real well, you can almost think like, man, maybe this is legit, only to find out that nope, it was just all written well, but it was made up. Okay.
Yeah. Just a real fun fact. There's a direct line between Chris Roberts and Albert Einstein.
Really?
Well, in terms of the whole thing with quantum drives, so the reason that we have warp drives, quantum drives in Star Citizen is the same reason you have them in Star Trek.
Right.
But why did Gene Roddenberry have them in Star Trek, other than needing to be able to get the crew somewhere fast? Right.
Right.
He actually looked at Einstein's general special relativity.
Yep.
And saw that there was a way to do this.
Yes.
And so the guy that created the Alcubierre warp theory, Miguel Alcubierre, he was a big Star Trek fan. He's a Mexican astrophysicist. So he was inspired by Star Trek in his real life to then see, can this be possible?
Yes.
And then Chris Roberts was inspired by him to make the quantum drive based on his theory.
Yeah.
When you first said that, Jade, I was thinking, wait, Chris Roberts is related to Einstein?
No.
That's what I thought you meant.
No.
Yeah, no, the direct connection.
Not by blood, but by ideas.
And it's interesting that you would say that. For those of you who might even remember, I'm an old guy, so I'm going to go back to what Jade mentioned about Star Trek. When Roddenberry was pulling Star Trek together, they would consult with folks in the scientific community at universities. They would consult with NASA. In fact, what was interesting is that some of the things that Star Trek developed, which some of you guys know, which they created for the show, actually later on, there became variations of those things. For example, the sickbay bed. That was something that, when talking to scientists at that time in the military, that idea was already in development, being able to put someone on a bed and it being able to measure body temperature and things of that nature. Same thing for those of us who remember from a geek standpoint, the first flip phones that we got. What was it? The Motorola Razr. When we got that phone that it flipped up like a communicator. Everybody, first thing thought of it. In fact, they used the whole Star Trek marketing thing behind that phone. Who would have thought that you would have something in your hand that you could communicate with back in the 1960s, like that looked like a communicator? Go ahead, FC, you gonna say something?
I don't know how they didn't get sued.
Well, there was no reason to get sued. The idea of a hand transmitter is not new, but I think it was just the way.
Thing,
well, that wasn't copyright. I mean, it wasn't like you trademarked it was a prop from a TV show. I'm just saying, the fact that it was ahead of its time. And whips. My mom, I'll give you another quick example. Jade, you'll like this. Every once in a while, I'll be with my mom and I'll use my watch, my Apple Watch, to answer the phone. Now, my mom freaked out the first time she saw that, because that took my mom back to the 1940s when the Dick Tracy comics were out, and Dick Tracy had this watch that he would talk to people on. Who'd have thought that one day there would be a watch, from my mother's perspective, that really did something like that. So there are times when technology and science actually get projected, and eventually we come up with something either very similar or almost identical to. Who knows what's 900 years from now what we're going to come up with? We'll have to see. But in the meantime, yeah, go ahead, FC.
I have a quick example. Zoom calls is basically from the 1950s, 1960s. People used to see people in movies and TV shows talking to each other like on the telephone, but using video communication. So Zoom call it takes descended from that, in my opinion.
Yeah. I hate to tell you this, old man, but that ain't far enough back. It starts back in the 1920s and 30s. The 1950s,
Okay.
believe it or not. Believe it or not, AT&T had that technology in the 1950s. It was already there, where people were able to communicate. Right. It's just that you had to be wealthy to have that type of thing, or in business. So the telecommunication phone, like what we do with a video call, was really around the 1950s. But you'd have to go way back even further than that, when it was not, you know what I mean? When the technology was like, it was considered to be in the future. You know what I mean?
Right.
But yeah, we have seen it evolve over time to now where you're able to do that type of phone call right in the palm of your hand, right? You don't have to be sitting at a desk or anything like that. So yeah. Okay.
There's a reason why this occurs, which goes back to like that Roddenberry example, is that scientists quite often are very big fans of sci-fi.
Yes.
So it's almost like a symbiotic relationship between scientists and engineers
Yeah.
and sci-fi, because one influences the other, vice versa. So,
Well, what was Sagan's big thing, right? Possibilities, right? You know, that idea of imagining and going beyond just what's necessarily concrete to the abstract, right? What are the possibilities that could happen? You have to kind of have some, I would think it's helpful to have a good imagination along with having empirical data and facts too, because it allows you to think outside the box, right?
Danger Hobo in chat says I'm at 20% very quiet.
Really? All right, let's see if we can boost Jade up a little
I had to
bit.
turn Griffin up in Discord.
I've got Jade at 150%.
Quiet in here.
Yeah, I've got Jade at 150%, but give me 1 second. I'm going to do something. Jade, go ahead and talk for me.
Okay, so yeah.
Is that better? Is that better, gang? Let's see if that's
science
better.
and sciencing.
Let's see if they say that's better. Is that better, you guys?
Is that better?
Somebody give us a shout.
And CC Creator, thank you for
They
the
say
sub.
yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank
They
you.
say yes. Thank you guys. Yes, thank you guys for the subs.
Great.
Jade, go ahead. Did you give your, oh yeah, you did, right? You gave your definition, right? Did we get that? Okay, cool. Okay, so we're going to give you guys some examples, but we are going to watch a video. We're going to watch this video first. This video was from 7 years ago. It was from Around the Verse back in the old ATV days, for those of you who remember ATV. What they're going to talk about here is a tool that CIG used to help them start building a solar system, They're going to talk about the difficulties of it, but they're also going to talk about how this tool makes that process happen. Now, mind you, this was 7 years ago. I am probably sure it has been stepped up since then, but I think at least it gives you an idea of the work that it takes to be able to do something like this, because I think maybe sometimes we don't really think that there's a lot of thought. They just kind of put animations in and that's all they did. So let's take a quick look at this video and then we're going to talk about it. Is that the right thing? That is not the right thing. Hold on a second. Where's my video? Oh, where are you? Fastcart, you got to talk because the video's not popping up.
Okay.
Or I could talk about that whole thing of drag in space.
Yes.
A
Why don't
lot
you
of
touch
times
that?
CIG makes decisions that are gameplay decisions. For instance, we have drag in space, and it used to only affect things like rocks that you mine, because obviously you don't want to have to chase after a rock that you cracked, because Newton's laws of motion. So they make them slow down after a while. So there are a lot of things in the game that are not realistic, because if they were realistic, the game would become a lot more tedious and unmanageable.
It'd be pretty tough. Space is a tough place to navigate around in reality. It's not as easy as people think. Without computers, it can be very tough.
Yeah.
And
Togi wants not an explanation, but you said Dragon Space?
no, drag in space.
Drag in space.
Not dragon,
okay.
not dragon space, Togi.
I
Oh
heard
my
it
God.
too. Togi's not the only one. Drag in space. Okay.
Drag in space.
Okay.
All right.
All right, that's okay. All right, here we got the video now. Hold on here. Here we go.
As Chris Smith mentioned, building the Nox was made easier because the APOA ship pipeline was already established. Having such systems in place are key to reducing development times going forward.
Yeah, especially when building a game of such size and scope. Another example of the Solid, a tool we've created to make building solar systems easier.
Yeah, that's right. CryEngine, as you all know, was not meant to handle game with the maps the size of an entire solar system, let alone even 10 or 20 kilometers across. So it made placing objects difficult and time-consuming. Yep. So now let's take a look at what it takes to build a solar system from scratch.
I'm Luke Presley. I'm lead designer on Star Citizen Live.
Hello, I'm Sherry Heiberg. I'm the archivist here at CIG.
I'm Dave Haddock. I'm the lead writer over at CIG.
Recently, I was on a Britison Con panel, and I got asked if there were any unsung heroes in the Star Citizen tech. Things that aren't flashy enough to get their own kind of featurettes or anything, but which make our lives possible kind of thing. We're building a solar system. We're building a galaxy. So how do we build a solar system? We recently got a new tool called the Solar System Ed, or SOLED as we call it. It was something that was kind of, we made the brief here, and then Sascha Hober in Germany actually built the tool. What it allows us to do is, build a solar system, build a hierarchy. I bring in a sun, and then I give it children, which are the planets. And then I give those children, which are the moons. And then I can give those children, which are, satellites. And I can very easily give them an orbital distance and just have, created the whole thing in a matter of minutes. And that sounds really simple. It sounds like something we should have been able to do from day one.
When we started getting close to the deadline for the star map, we had to do a kind of heavy internal push to generate a lot of star systems. We were sort of thinking, oh, this would be cool to have a system like this, and oh, it would be cool to have a star like this. And astronomy, virtually every day you're finding new cool stuff that's happening. So we're trying to get as much of that stuff in there. We were sort of faced with this thing of like, well, we should probably see, because there's such an emphasis on like realism, and while it may not be entirely accurate, like plausible, I think was sort of the term.
When we were building Crusader, for instance, for 2.0, what we'd have to do is we'd bring in Crusader and we'd set that down at the origin, which is 000 in the XYZ. And then we'd bring in the moon and that'd be on 000 as well. To get it to the right orbital distance, we'd have to move it in either just the X or just the Y away from the planet. And that's in meters as well. So you can imagine how many meters away a moon is from a planet. And then obviously, if you've got 3 of these moons, you don't want them all at 90 degrees from the planet, so that means you've got to add some rotation on, which means what we had to do was we'd put down another object in the middle of Crusader at the origin, and we'd physically link it to the moon, and then we'd start twisting. That would move the moon around too, and you wouldn't be able to see it because it'd be too far away. And the moment you've moved it off of pure Z or pure X or pure Y, you've lost that one pure number. It becomes 2 numbers that you have to do maths on to figure out. So it wasn't allowing us to be able to change this in future. Imagine if this scale changed. We just have to start again. What the SOLED allows us to do is, if we change the scale of the universe, we just scale down the numbers that the orbital distance away from its parent. In a matter of minutes, you would have a rescaled solar system.
We try our best to make things as accurate as possible, but still respect the need for the players to actually enjoy what we have.
So we got a bunch of astrophysicists. The writers gave them the brief for each of these solar systems. They went away and came back with a spreadsheet that has an unbelievable amount of data in there, more than we could ever use.
There's a service that actually a collective of scientists and researchers and stuff like that who basically volunteer their time to screenwriters, video games, stuff like that. You can contact them and they basically will put you in touch with an expert.
Yeah, he was an astrophysicist who had served as a consultant on other properties before. We learned about star types and green bands and how long it takes to evolve life and the density of asteroid belts. And we basically got a crash course on how to build a system from scratch if you're not a scientist.
They went to town on this. So the list that basically Sherry worked with them on was everything from the size of the system itself to where's the green band start, where's it stop, where's the frost line start, daily rotations, orbital rotations, perihelion. I mean, I'm going to throw out terms that I don't know what they mean, but like, the odd orbital patterns, inclination, declination, all this stuff.
We kind of just take, for now, the size and the distance from the orbital distance from its parent, but obviously things like the density will affect the gravity of the thing eventually. It even goes into details like how the mass of a asteroid ring. So if you took all the asteroids and combined them together, what the mass of that would be. It's extremely detailed, and these guys know what they're talking about. So our solar systems are going to be extremely realistic. Obviously, we scale it to keep it, playable, because no one actually wants to drive around the Earth, but also to keep the tech working. Like we can't make any planet say bigger than Earth right now, so that means we have to bring everything slightly in so that we can do these super Earths like ArcCorp.
They were able to build the systems with respect to orbit. They didn't want to cause like a bad orbital resonance situation, so the planets were a certain amount of AU apart and in a certain position so that the orbits wouldn't fling planets out of the system. So an AU is an astronomical unit. It's a standard unit of measurement used in astronomy, astrophysics, and it's the distance between the Earth and the Sun. It's used so that you can easily communicate vast distances in solar systems. Our solar system, for example, is around 50 AU, if you include the Oort cloud and Pluto and all of that. It's basically so you don't have to say something like this system is 575,809,473 kilometers.
It'll factor in based on what our time dilation system is, like how long a day is in the game, whether that's at a scale, because it might actually, in a weird way, I don't know about the formula, but it might actually balance out that basically if the time was running at a tenth of this or 90% faster or whatever, then it would equal out the distance traveled would make sense, if you scale it back to normal time.
I think it was almost a year trying to get all the numbers in, and we went through many processes of going back and checking to see whether or not the numbers that they gave us reflected consistently with the lore we had given. Whenever we had questions about stuff that we wanted to make real but couldn't, we would talk to the astrophysicists and they would usually give us good ideas. There are some things that we weren't able to keep entirely real, like asteroid belts, for example. In real life asteroid belts, the distance between asteroids is so vast that it wouldn't pose an issue or an obstacle to any kind of race, for example. You would just mosey on through it. It would just be like going through regular space. Asteroid belts in our game are denser. It's not like real life, but it's a lot more fun.
And also we would have situations where they would say, hey, what you have presented in the lore is not possible, but what you can do is if you change this, this, and this, it's a minimal retcon from the backer's perspective, but it will kind of pull it into scientific feasibility, which was sort of the middle ground we kind of aimed for. But the thing we also learned was that space be crazy. This can't happen, and then a week later something would come out in the, NASA or someone would be like, oh, by the way, there's a diamond planet, and we're like,
yeah, there's a diamond planet. There's a planet where it rains glass. There's a stellar cloud that's supposed to taste like raspberry schnapps. Space is really weird.
There's a gas giant that's the color of coal, like pure pitch black, that we stole.
Yeah, we definitely stole that.
Yeah, space be crazy.
The things we're placing with the Solid are obviously right now the procedural planets. Crusader will be a different entity because it's a gas giant. It'll be a gas giant entity that we've not got the tech for yet, but we'll have an amazing shader that goes around it and creates these wisps and these eyes and storms. Obviously, we can also, as I said before, put satellites going around and things like that. We also placed the asteroid ring around the solar system with it.
They are building the systems on a 1/10 scale. So for example, if we have a system that's 200 AU in our notes, it comes out as 20 AU in the system that the designers are building. So that, like, number one, it's a lot more fun for the players this way, because systems that if we had like a 200 AU system, it would take, I don't know, years for the players to get across it even. It's just it's an incredible distance. So we needed to scale it down so that number one, it would be fun for the players, and number two, that we could build the whole thing seamlessly within our engine.
Quantum travel is kind of locked at around 1/10 the speed of light. So, even at that, it's going to take a really long time to fly from place to place. So with real long haul travel things, it's going to take, I won't say where the example took place, but there was a situation where something was going to be traveling in quantum travel for 20 minutes. So, break out your cards and load up your Netflix queue. While you're in quantum travel, you could get up out of your chair. I mean, considering you have a multi-crew ship, you would get up out of your chair and stuff like that. And if something yanked you out of it, then you would have to, run back. And it's also the thing, it's like quantum travel, the idea was that quantum travel only moves in straight lines. The reason why your body doesn't liquefy is that there's this sort of anti-grav bubble around you, but because you're moving in a straight line, you're not getting that sort of the intense pressure. But if you were to turn suddenly, you would go flying against the wall at 1/10 the speed of light, which probably hurt.
Yeah, it might hurt a little. Just a little bit.
It feels like this sort of adherence to, again, even at like a 1/10 scale. I mean, in 3.0, we're starting off with the moons of Crusader, and they're huge. It takes 15 hours to drive it, like around once. The interesting balance is going to be, how do we achieve this sort of like the crafted experience with the massive scale, like that sort of vast openness, but still feel like there's, that there's interesting flavors to all the places you go.
My hope is that the players will see the numbers that we have generated for them, the care that we've put into designing these systems, and will know that they have all this information at their fingertips and know how real we want the systems to be for them.
We would never be able to create one solar system, let alone, the hundreds of solar systems we're going to have to make if it wasn't for this tool. You can imagine like the amount of hours it would take to hand move these out, because the CryEngine was never built to do this. I say it sounds extremely simple, and it is a simple tool, but it wasn't there out the box.
So an incredible amount of work went into coming up with over 100 systems and scientifically vetting them. But now we have all the information, it makes it easier to build them in Solid.
Yeah, for example, the Stanton system, which we're currently building out, is just over 800 million kilometers across, even after scaling it down by a factor of 10.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing amount of distance.
Yeah.
Okay. Boom. There we go. I gotta shut this off manually. I forgot I got this in here a different way. Okay, there was a lot there. The Solar System Editor, SOLED. Again, folks, we want to remind you guys this video was from 7 years ago. If you notice, they were just going into 3.0 at that time. So a lot of this stuff, we didn't even have the moons around Crusader yet. So obviously some of this information may be a little dated, maybe a little bit off, but we wanted to give you the general idea of the amount of work that CIG did put into trying to as they started building out these systems, what the tools are that they use. Jade, you got any immediate thoughts on that?
Well, I remember when this came out, and I was loving it, obviously. It wasn't most people's favorite episode or part of an episode, but I was loving it because, seeing how they actually built out the systems, and the fact that they did consult with an astrophysicist on things like the habitable zone, or as they call them, the green band or the green zones. It was great. And I kind of thought that when I first saw this R map, I'm like, that is plausible. Like, did they talk with somebody? Like, and sure enough, they confirmed it there that they did.
Yeah, I just want to say that now that the tool, the SOLED, it would probably be called Star Soul now because of the trademarking and branding that they had to do. And I forgot, you said this video was 7 years ago. This is the whole Space Be Crazy meme. I forgot that I had it. This is the video that started then. That meme was popular for like a couple of weeks. One picture had him looking like the alien guy from the history program saying "Space Be Crazy." So yeah, that was the thing. And at the beginning of the video, he was talking about our little children. That's a lot of child support.
Wikipedia made a song called "Space Be Crazy," where he
Yeah.
basically vocoded them.
Yep.
It's a really good song. You should check
It's
it out
pretty
on
cool.
Wikipedia. So
Yep, it's
all that
pretty
music
cool.
is free.
Yeah. Jay, could you elaborate a little bit on? I know you were making a comment earlier about inside the quantum bubble.
Oh yeah.
Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
So for people, I'm gonna have to grab a video to put in chat for people to watch later. So one of the things that he said is not quite correct, which is going to mean a lot when we can start quantuming, where you're controlling where you're going in quantum, right? So CIG has a convenient out for this, because in reality, if you're inside a warp bubble like that, not only does phi equals 0, time is not, you're not experiencing time dilation, right? But you're also not experiencing velocity changes with the outside, or when you're in a quantum bubble or warp bubble, you're in a bubble that's outside of normal space-time, right? So you're not moving faster than light or anything, or you're not experiencing that velocity change. So that everything else they said was great. That was the only thing that was a little bit misleading, but I don't blame them, because that's how most people would think of it.
Yeah.
Because we think of things in terms of them being
Force,
engines and not space-time itself being, compressed and expanded.
Yep, makes sense.
I mean, it's all relative, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, just ask Einstein.
All right, let's jump into some of these topics here. We're going to be doing fact and fiction. Fastcart, if you wouldn't mind, why don't you take this very first one of what the fiction is on our very first topic here. Oh, well, let's go back before we get into that. Jade, I forgot we were going to talk about this. Just kind of give some clarification to some things, because I need to change this. Jade and I were talking before the show, and one of the big changes that was here, and Jade, why don't you go ahead and elaborate on this a little bit while I make the change for us, okay?
Sure.
You see what I'm doing?
Oh, yeah. You're talking about the scale? Right. So, so planets are between 1/4 and 1/6 scale, according to the devs, and the distances, as you saw there in the video, are 1/10. And I think a lot of the reason for planets and moons being the scale they are is you want that cinematic, or Chris Roberts wants that cinematic look to Star Citizen, right? So, in order to get that, with also having the scale down system, we have multiple. It can be confusing to people, especially if you come over from something like Elite, right? But we have multiple scales all in play in Stanton. Yeah. That's why it drives me mad when people say, let's compare Stanton to the solar system. It's like, all your scales are different, right? Your planet scale is different than the star. The star is, I think, 1/3 or 1/4. And then the distances in between them are 1/10. So people just don't do it. Don't do it. Save yourself some sanity, right?
Yeah. And so we talked a little bit.
I think.
Go ahead.
In fact, I think it might be more accurate to say moons and planets are 1/4 or 1/6, because one of them is one scale and the other one is another. I think the moon is like 1/6 and the planet are 1/4, but I'm not. Don't quote me on that one. I forgot which one is which.
I think it may be reversed, but there was like a different scale.
And Jade, you talked a little bit about earlier about the comparisons of microtech, and they've even mentioned it in the video about how our corporate with super Earths, right? So maybe that's another thing, because one of the things I took away from this too is that remembering the fact that it's so difficult for us not to compare games to other games sometimes, right? These planets, the scale of them, if they were to create these, they also talk about the technical challenge to reproduce that, right? And it's one thing to just say we're going to produce this world. That's one thing. But when you're talking about producing a world that also has all these other entities involved in it, right? Not just some world that you're looking at from a distance, but the world that you can fly down to, that you can interact with, that has all these different things going on. The technical hurdle for that has got to be huge. So striking the balance, and this is going to be a point of contention because there are a lot of us who do enjoy one-to-one scale when it comes to things that are exploration and science. And then there's also that side of another group of people who are playing the game and they're in it for a certain time frame to, like, I wish Captain Sirius was here because he's talked about like when they travel in Elite. I never did it, but people travel in Elite for weeks to get somewhere. Like, I'm talking about real time, weeks to get somewhere. And that's a certain type of person who enjoys that level of exploration and gameplay. Then there are other people who that would be a complete turnoff. So CIG's trying to find this, where's the place that lands somewhere in between to give some satisfaction to both. I don't think that we're going to be able to satisfy the person who wants that instantaneous being able to get there in no time. And I don't think you're going to be able to satisfy that person who wants to be, 2 weeks of travel is, they don't care, that's a part of the journey for them. It'll be interesting to see where they land at. I don't know. Jay, they also said this about the software. He made the reference of saying, if we have to change the scale again, remember he talked about that?
Yes. That gives me hope.
Yeah, right. Well, you know what? We saw it happen with Pyro. Right, because in theory, Pyro was supposed to be like 15 or 14 AU, and I think they brought it down to like 9.5, 9.6, something like that. They pulled it back some. I'm wondering whether or not that will, systems will scale based upon. We always say this anyway, because we talked about like how long. I'm using something very crude, guys. Back in the day, if you were around back in the day, you remember you used to actually wait around for a train for 5 minutes, like real time. You waited 5 minutes for the train. And eventually they reeled that in a little bit. First time we went to Hurston, it was 15 minutes to get from Port Olisar to Hurston, and they've reeled that in a little bit, with the and
I remember rushing to the train, only the bell missing, and say, "Oh man!"
Yep, and you sat there for 5 minutes waiting for the next train to come. So my point is that JD was saying, you heard the same thing. That they can adjust and scale things. Maybe bigger, maybe smaller, whatever the case may be, but we'll see.
Yeah, and that's super important going forward, especially back then, because I don't think they knew what they were going to eventually settle on. Fully. So them having that flexibility was important, and with technology changes, who knows what this game will be in 10 years. Right? Maybe they will go one-to-one, but there's no plans to do that. I will say this: having been in a space, I guess you've been in Space Engine, Griff, so that's a totally one-to-one universe. And you have some incredible views and things like that. So it's not that you wouldn't get it; it's just that they are way more special when things are one-to-one. So my only criticism of the direction that CIG took with scale, other than the technical limitations, because obviously those are a real thing, is that if everything is close together, nothing feels far. Space is no longer really spacey. It's a theme park. Right.
That's one of the problems I have, and I don't want to throw any rocks at any games here, but that is one of the things I don't like about when I go and I see No Man's Sky. I see all the planets, like, you know what I mean? Like 3 or 4 of them all around. I'm like, it don't get me wrong. It's pretty and everything, but it doesn't make me feel, it's right there. You know what I mean? And I know there are people who are really struggling with this whole time sync thing with Star Citizen, right? Some of you guys have done the run from Gauss to Terra. That's like a 30-minute jump across the system. And Stanton's small. So... I don't know how you guys are going to handle when you're in a system that's 50 AU or 70 AU, but we'll have to see, what CIG does with that. But
quick question for people who were in the PTU or Ivacati, how long did it take to travel the jump point?
Well, that's different.
Yeah,
because
it's different.
For testing purposes, they made it fairly quick.
Yeah.
And
it may not be as quick as it was for us. In fact, I think they even said that.
They did. They said. They said when they did the video on it, they said it'll be about a 3-minute trip.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Jumping a system is way more than jumping through the jump points. I mean, I'm talking about if you have to cross it. I don't know if there's going to be a lot of situations where you have to cross from one end to another. I don't think that that's going to be a thing. But for people who might want to do it for some reason, take out your deck of cards, basically. you know.
One of the types of planetary systems that we do not have, we have binary systems in Star Citizen's lore, but they're all a type of binary that you're probably used to from Star Wars. If you saw Tatooine, right? You got the two suns in the sky because the planet orbits both of the suns, right? Both of the stars. But the most common binary system in real life is a different type of binary where each star has its own little family of planets, right? And those two star systems are separated by a lot of AU. But if you were an alien in the one system, you could theoretically, with like technology that we have now, be able to get to the other planetary system, right? And I thought it would be pretty cool if we had something like that in Star Citizen, because it would be a long quantum trip, and it would make space seem, at least in that system, seem vast. Like, you know, you've got to wait 2 hours to get to that other star, because there's no jump point to go to that star. Just
travel straight there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. 9K stole my thought. CIG will give us a classic three-body problem.
Super C, thank you so much for the follow. And I saw your remark earlier about Neil deGrasse, and no, the closest thing I am to Neil deGrasse is my skin color. Everything else, forget it. He's way smarter than I am. Okay.
Did you meet him?
No.
Oh, okay.
Not me.
Okay.
Not me.
I mean,
no.
the hair's a little
Not
bit
me.
there. I see what he's talking about.
No. Okay, so we're running behind here, and I'm talking to my panel. No, we're having fun. We're having fun. And I just want you to know we're going to kind of push through these as we get through them. That's all I want to say. So let's go ahead and jump into them, because we haven't even started on the very first one. Okay, Fastcart, why don't you read that first one there for me? And then Jade, you'll pick it up from there.
So, fact and fiction. Atmospheric re-entry without burn-up, and Star Citizen ships can enter a planet's atmosphere at high speeds without significant heat shielding or risk burn-up. Fact.
No, Jay's got the fact. Jay's got the fact. You just have the fiction.
All right. Fact. In reality, atmospheric entry at such speeds requires heavy-duty shields to protect from intense friction and heat generated during re-entry, as seen with spacecraft like NASA's Space Shuttle or SpaceX's Dragon capsule. The hand wavium likely is that the electromagnetic shields a ship has protects it.
There we go.
And maybe, and I'm speculating, maybe when we get armor, maybe that'll be, you know, the thing that they say protects ships, and maybe, who knows, in the future, maybe we do get some type of structural damage if you have a really bad entry vector.
That's what I was going to say. What happens if they decide to shift it so that you do a re-entry at a bad vector and you actually start taking damage, and you really have to be, you know, reduce speed or come in a much more controlled way than just burning in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It would be interesting to see if they make that as a part of gameplay. If they don't, okay. I will say it's a nice, cool effect. And you know what was cool? Have you ever been on the planet and seen somebody burn in before?
Yes.
Oh,
yes. It's amazing.
It is. It actually is very, very cool. So Bluesy, you are crazy. I'm going to let that go through because you're being funny. All right, let's go on to our next one.
I was looking at it myself, Graham.
Yep. Fiction. Shields in the verse can absorb immense amounts of kinetic and energy-based attacks, including projectiles, lasers, and explosions, without significant structural damage to the ship. Once depleted, they can regenerate quickly.
Fact. In reality, there is no known material or energy field that can absorb energy like this and then regenerate without continuous, massive energy input. So, you know, this is where I had issues with hover mode, because people would be fine with things like this, but then our ship would have to struggle like a 1950s helicopter, even though it's got all this energy that it's, you know, constantly putting out in order for these things to actually work. It made no sense.
Yeah. And Jade and I have had these conversations in the past, guys, and we have fun with, I have fun with them, at least. I don't know if she does. I probably make her blood pressure go up. But my issue is always, how do we balance 900 years from now? Because if it were my future 900 years from now, I would get in the ship and talk to it, and that would be it. And that'd be all I'd do. I wouldn't do anything. I'd say where I want to go. it would get me there. I'd go make some tea and read a book until I arrived. Now, I don't know if that's the future or not, but I'm saying when I project technology and I start thinking about what if the technology gets to a certain point, the difficulty I have with that is that there's a part of me that if I was playing a game, if my destination was if there was something at my destination that made it very cool, I might be okay with that. But in the game space, if I had to do that, if I didn't have any interactions, because first of all, I think it's ludicrous, and we all know this. It's ludicrous that we've got these flip switches and stuff in our ships, right? We all know that. These mechanical switches and all that stuff.
That's great.
That's why I fly Origin.
There you go. There you go. But even then, I'm just saying the interactions, the physical interaction stuff would be a thing for me in the future. I would think that maybe we wouldn't have all that physical. But from a gameplay space, it does give me a feeling of control, that I have something to do with where I'm going, or I have some control aspects of it. So there's this weird balance for me when it comes to 900 years from now, would we still be operating this way? And then what do we pick and choose? What are those things that, yes, 900 years from now, this is very appropriate. 900 years from now, this would definitely be obsolete. And I know we're going to get into this later on when we talk about ballistics and some other stuff. But I always wrestle with this personally. It's always a wrestle for me when it comes to the part of me that wants the futurist side of me that wants the really cool, thing. But then there's that gaming side of me that I always wonder, will I still feel the same about the game if I didn't feel like I was doing something?
So I just want to address something in chat where somebody said it's science fiction, not science fact. Yeah, but there's also this thing about it being a plausible future, right? Mm-hmm. If everything is too familiar, it doesn't feel like the future. Mm-hmm. If you look at the interior of the Dragon capsule, I dare you to find a whole bunch of switches. Yeah. And that's now, right? So you're making a game that, your kids are going to play at some point, and they're going to be maybe looking at people that went up in capsules with no switches and saying, why are there switches on all these 900 year, in the future spaceships? So that's what I mean is it's science fiction, but things like that in Drake ships especially are just rule of cool. There's no reason you have a 1930s elevator of control on a starship. It's just somebody thought that was cool.
Oh, it was cool.
And so they put it there.
A good example. Go ahead, fastcart.
I will push back a little bit. I think the Atlas was recently released, and getting into that thing is really cool. It's totally, the alien vibe, but I mean, it has all those switches and you got to pull it down and everything. So I think that's cool.
Yeah, but we're not disputing. I don't think we're disputing things being cool. We're disputing future reality. In the future, I'm not getting in that mechanical thing 900 years from now. Believe you me, that's not going to be a 900 year from now thing.
Exactly.
I think that's what we're saying.
He says you can get on no car. I have a friend and they have a Tesla, and there's no switches, right? And that's now. So yes, it is science fiction, but it's also future science fiction. It's not even Cyberpunk 2077. It's Star Citizen 2954.
Yeah. Now there are games. Those of you who play Starfield, Bethesda made a very deliberate effort to say that they were doing a retro style to their game. That's what they wanted to do. So you still had this kind of feeling. Those of you who've watched the original Alien films, same thing. There was a lot of switches and mechanical stuff. That was a very deliberate effort to bring a certain feeling about the ship, right? But then if you guys have ever watched other films, I'm trying to think of the one that Passengers no, not Star Trek. Passengers, Oblivion. There are other ones where everything is so streamlined and slick. There's no but there's very short amount of times in those spaces, because when you have to be on the alien ship, you need to be doing stuff. If they just all were sitting around like this watching a computer do everything, it would have been a boring film. So there had to be these dynamics that they put in to make you feel like there was work being done and all this other stuff. So I'm saying even in gaming, there's that balance even for me when it comes to Star Citizen. I'm like Jade. I wish the Origin ships were completely like top of the futurist list of things, because I think that would be very cool. But I know there would be other people that would be totally turned off by that, which is fine. If they want to get into the Drake ship, God bless them. If they want to flip switches, they can.
Exactly.
If they want to do that's fine. Let's keep moving here, the gang. Fastcart, you got the next one here.
Okay, so fiction. Inertial dampeners. Star Citizen spaceship stations and planetary structures often feature artificial gravity, which allows for normal movement in space.
Jade?
Yeah, and the fact is that in the real world, there's no known method for generating artificial gravity other than simulating it through rotation or acceleration. Like you've seen the science fiction space stations that rotate. That is to create, a form of artificial gravity.
Yeah. Jade, what would be is that theory or real?
Is what theory or real?
I mean, in space.
Oh, you mean
the rotation? Yeah.
Oh no, that's real.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
no.
real.
Okay, but my question is, why haven't we done that yet?
Well, there was at one time going to be a module that was going to attach to the ISS.
Okay, that was going to do it and create it. Okay.
Yeah, and there is a company, I forget their name, but you can probably Google them, which wants to build a space station, a rotating space station. Like that. So it's something that you have to do it at a big enough scale, right?
Right, it's got to be big.
If you have a small like wheel rotating, and you're gonna feel
you'll be
sick.
jacked up. Yep.
Yeah.
No, I get it. No, I mean I know that it's can be done. I'm just wondering why we haven't. I mean, 1968's 2001 was the first time we saw the centrifugal, the wheel, and it was creating gravity. I've just always wondered what was the holdup, because I would figure by, how many years later, 100 years or 80 years later, that science, but you're telling me that someone actually has planned to try it. So that's fine.
Yeah. There's a company, and I'm going to actually find it and put the link in. But yeah, there's a company that wants to build like a big space hotel.
Okay.
That basically it'll rotate.
Okay. Good FC.
And I'm not a scientist, so I don't have a degree or anything, but I would imagine it might become difficult to dock with, because you have to align and get the rotation and everything like that. So it might be easier for the pilot if they have to dock to something that's not spinning so much.
Fastcart, they don't pilot ships to dock.
Thank you.
Again, here's another thing we do in real life now.
Yep.
Spaceships aren't piloted too much by like astronauts. They're flown by computers.
Yeah, Fastcart. If you go back to 2001, they actually show them how they do that. When the thing is spinning, the ship locks and it turns with it and goes in. It's possible to do that. Yeah, I know.
I was just trying to. Okay.
That's all right. It's okay. It's all right. We don't mind. You're still dealing with the Flintstones. It's okay. It's not a problem. Don't worry about it. Okay. All right. Let's do the next
I
one.
wish I could use my leg to my vehicle, but oh well.
All right. Inertial dampeners. Starships and Star Citizen can make sudden changes in direction and speed without killing the occupants due to the presence of inertial dampeners.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one, and we're not talking about quantum travel in this case.
Right.
So in reality, sudden acceleration or deceleration would cause extreme forces on passengers, likely leading to serious injury or death without proper mitigation. While we black out from extremely high G-forces, we do not enter a down state or die. So again, this is probably to facilitate gameplay, because your buddy's flying the ship and they decide to take a really bad turn and they kill off the crew. I don't think that's something that most people would be happy with, especially if you're
I will say this though, have you ever had that happen in the ships where you get jacked up? I've had that happen back in the day when they first put that in. I got hurt bad a couple times in the cuddy, and the person turned hard, and boy, I took damage. I didn't die, but I took some damage. Wish that they would put that back in more.
I mean, I'm imagining like that old Star Trek move when the ship gets damaged and everyone on the bridge go one way or the other.
Yeah. But to Jade's point, for gameplay reasons, especially when the situation comes up where people are responding to emergencies on a ship, if you're being told to go replace a component or a fire has broken out, obviously if you're in a battle situation and if there are, tactical movements being made by the ship, the players would be hurt pretty bad probably by the time they got to wherever they had to go. But that is a fact. And inertial dampeners, for those of you who even remember back from Star Trek, that was one of the first things I remember them talking about, inertial dampeners. If you didn't have them on the ship, you would basically be jacked up. So
Now, there is an interesting thing here is that back in the 1990s, NASA's Breakthrough Propulsion Physics program, which it doesn't exist anymore, but there's something like it that does. They actually were doing, this is really out there science, doing research into whether something like this could actually exist in reality. Somehow, looking at like Mach's principle and figuring out, is there a way that we can change inertia? But yeah, it's still the realm of sci-fi, even though, there are a lot of things that come from sci-fi that, there are interesting possibilities within physics to access, but yeah, this one's still sci-fi.
Yeah. That's a long formula on the chalkboard.
We just need to get those airbags to just fill everything up, have everything with airbags for passengers everywhere. That's all.
You have to make your whole flight suit an airbag if that's the case. But yeah. All right, FC, this one's on you.
So lack of heat dissipation. Fiction. Large ships appear to operate continuously without visible signs of heat dissipation or a massive energy generation system on the ship itself. In the real world, generating such an energy field would produce massive amounts of heat and require enormous power sources, which would need a dedicated system for heat management to prevent the ship from overheating.
So the fact is that in space, the only way to dissipate heat is through radiative cooling, which would require highly visible radiators. And so for small ships such as fighters, my headcanon is that the wings function as radiators in space. But for a ship like the Reclaimer, the 890 Jump, Hammerhead, Idris, or other really big ships, there's really nothing we see on them visually which would seem to function as an efficient radiator.
Yeah. I don't know that people ever think about those atmospheric temperature, things like that in space. And I know a lot of times people talk about space is dangerous because they want to talk about, human beings being out there, which is quite often true. But there are other things that make space, very dangerous that we don't think about. I don't know. Do you remember, Jade, one of the first tests that they did for the Apollo series of flights where the pilots were killed on the pad? Do you remember that story?
Yeah.
Do you remember what it was? It was they had a spark that kicked off, and at that time they were using pure O2 into the capsule.
Yeah, it was the Apollo fire.
Yeah, the Apollo fire. Yep, exactly.
Yeah,
and I mean, just something as simple as that, right? Just something as simple as that, right? And you can understand why initially, let's put pure O2 into the capsule, but who'd have thought, something like that would be a dangerous outcome. And something like, go ahead.
Oh, no, yeah. It's interesting to me because, to me, that's just like pure oxygen,
Yeah.
But I guess they had to find that out first. I mean, for people that don't know, when we breathe air, most of what we breathe is not oxygen; it's nitrogen.
That's right.
Right.
Yep.
We're in an oxygen nitrogen atmosphere, but it's really a nitrogen oxygen atmosphere because there's way more nitrogen than oxygen. So it's, to me, I guess it was just the growing pains of the space program, but I was looked at that how did they not know that?
Yeah. Simple miss. And my point is that there are other things that can make space very dangerous. And your point about large ships here is, we don't really think about what it would take to run a ship like the ones you named there. It's no small task, the amount of energy that it would take to operate these ships. And let me ask you a question. Could ships like the Reclaimer and stuff run? They'd have to have reactors, right?
They do have reactors.
Okay, but
all of our ships have reactors.
All of them have reactors, but they? What type of reactors are they?
So the lore thing on this is that they are fusion reactors.
Oh, they are fusion. Okay.
I saw.
Yeah.
I wasn't
Okay.
sure.
All right. Okay.
And ArcCorp, they are well known for their fusion engines. Right, and fusion power plants, and of course they have very dangerous factories that you can't visit.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but antimatter does not exist in Star Citizen yet, right?
No, it does.
It does.
In fact, I didn't mention it because we're going to probably get to it down below when we start talking about munitions.
Yeah. All right, cool. All right, well, listen, we're going to take a quick commercial break. So far, hopefully, all you brainiacs out there are absorbing all this great information. We're trying to read some of the stuff you guys have in the chat. Some pretty cool stuff in there. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to pick up with some more fact and fiction with pseudoscience in Star Citizen. So hang in there. We'll be gone for just 1 minute. Boom. Okay, we are on our commercial break. Thank you guys, as always, for being here. We appreciate each of you who are here supporting us as always. Hope you guys are enjoying. I keep saying you guys. Hope you all are enjoying the topic today. We're having fun with it because I've always wanted to talk about this, but I've always felt too ignorant. But thank God we have Jade, and so she's making us. She's bringing all of us up a little bit in the area of science, and it's a real passion of hers. So we really appreciate what she's done for the show today, and of course having Fastcart here. He dropped in at the last minute, y'all. So we had a little extra to come in with us.
Yeah, I'm just here to make Griffin look smarter than it looks smarter. That's all I'm
No,
here for.
I don't know if you're making me look smarter. I don't know if you're making me. There's so much about this game that I've completely forgotten in the lore. So this is a good refresher for me. This is a good refresher for me as well. So I am just as happy with that.
Starting in
All right.
2014, I've forgotten a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Alrighty, we are back with the pseudoscience of Star Citizen. And let's go on to our next one. I think this one's on me. Fiction, tractor beams, mass cancellation. In Star Citizen, tractor beams enable ships and handheld devices to remotely manipulate objects of various sizes and masses, seemingly canceling the effects of gravity and inertia. These beams allow precise control over movement, even lifting vehicles, ships, and cargo with ease.
All right, and the fact is, however, this form of mass cancellation is more science fiction than science fact, as real-world physics has no method of reducing an object's mass via directed energy, nor manipulating objects at a distance without physical contact. There has, however, been some research in using sound as a form of an acoustic tractor beam to hold small particles in air. And this research focuses on very small particles, the size of a wavelength. So like the size of a sound wavelength. The immense energy requirements for anything the size of things we move around in Star Citizen, the lack of physical medium, and instantaneous control depicted in the verse make tractor beams a speculative technology beyond current scientific capabilities. And even if we had big sonic tractor beams, you wouldn't be able to use them in space because it's a vacuum.
Yes, a vacuum. Yeah. So
we keep calling Star Citizen a science game, but it's really a magic game because this is all magic. But, you know what they say, when technology becomes so advanced, it becomes indistinguishable from magic. That's what that is.
But the people that say that quite often get Clarke's Clarke's third law, Arthur C. Clarke, science fiction author, wrong, because they interpret it to mean that magic is science. And what he's talking about is not that magic is science or that science is magic, but that a sufficiently advanced technology without a technical background, if you don't know anything about how something works, it could look like magic. You take an iPhone or an Android.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah. 50 years and it probably looks like magic, right? But it's not, it's technology.
Yeah.
So it's not, because like some people that are really into woo-woo stuff will say, but magic's just another form of science, but it isn't. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, to the point, Fastcart used the word magic. I was going to say illusion more than anything. It's to give us the appearance of something happening that just really isn't happening. Sorry for reading this one to you guys. Those of you who just bought the Atlas, okay, we're sorry to hurt your feelings on this one with the tractor beams. But it is interesting that tractor beams, things like tractor beams, have been in science fiction for a very long time, and they've actually become so much a part of science fiction culture that it's very easy for people to feel like, oh, this is something that is probably very practical and can be done. Now, who knows in the future what will come up, but the technology is not an easy one. And Jay, why don't you explain a little bit? You mentioned about using it in the vacuum of space. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Right. So, yeah, because sound does not travel. It needs a medium to go through, right? So it needs a physical medium, either like air, that's a physical medium. Water is a very good conductor of sound. Or a solid object, like you can hear somebody banging on a wall in your house, right? But if you're in a vacuum, if you're in the vacuum of space, there's nowhere for that sound to go, right? And so if you had a sonic tractor beam, it could really only be used in an area where there's a medium for that sound to go through. And to answer the question that Togi put in chat, wouldn't negative mass that would be needed for warp drive also make a tractor beams possible? And the answer to that is no. Because you can use negative energy or negative mass energy, same thing according to Einstein's theory of relativity, right? But you cannot get an attractive force out of that, right? Other than converting it maybe to electromagnetism, and then now you have a magnetic, like a big electromagnet, but then now you have to have something that would be attracted to a magnet, and then you obviously have to project that magnetic force in one direction in an efficient way, right? So the answer to that is no way that we know of today would allow for negative mass or negative energy to produce a tractor beam. However, whatever it takes to produce artificial gravity or anti-gravity, like hover bikes, that could be used possibly for a tractor beam, but we're going to get to that.
Okay.
Now,
Zephyrus
Griffin, I
Hawk,
have a question.
excuse me a second. Zephyrus Hawk, thank you so much for the follow. We missed that earlier. Thank you for that. Yeah, go ahead, FC.
No, Star Wars, the first time I can recall hearing or seeing a tractor beam. Was there anything that you know of before that?
Star Trek, easily.
Star Trek had a tractor beam?
Yeah.
Okay.
Star Trek had tractor beams. They used tractor beams on the old Enterprise. The Enterprise got tractor beamed before. Yeah.
They used a tractor like a shuttle into the shuttle bay or something like that. I thought it was TNG, but okay. All right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. I meant, the old Star Trek. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
That was a good question, though, Togi. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, FC, this one's on you.
Fixing gravity manipulation on planets such as Levski. Levski is a community on Delamar and a small planetoid in the Nick system. Both it and Delamar has 1G gravity in game. In real-world physics, gravity is directly tied to a planet's mass, and we have no way to artificially alter it in a specific location on a planetary scale.
So, fact, for Delamar to make sense, it would have to be made out of some super dense matter, or someone is generating gravity. And so, I looked at this once. I think I did the math on it, and it would have to be something denser than neutron star matter for something that size to have 1G gravity.
I think
a neutron star, by the way, is a very dense object.
I think that the people of Nix have a neutron star in the center of that planetoid, and that's how you guys are pulling it off. I think that's what's happened some type of way. By the way, I watched that crummy Moonfall finally, fastcart. I'll have to tell you about that later last night as well. I finally finished it today. Jade, whatever you do, don't watch that film. Your brain will explode. Yeah, that's all I can tell you. All your science will fly out the window with this particular film. It's this idea. One of the things I do like that they did in the game, folks, is when we have, I wish they wouldn't call it soft death. I wish they would call it, I think Maverick has said this, just say your ship is disabled. But the one thing I did like about soft death was when it happened that my gravity went out in my ship, which I did like. I kept wondering whether or not when my ship was disabled, whether or not I would be able to walk around on it. I know that CIG has shown us, Jade, that they want to be able to create scenarios where players can go in and disable gravity on both ships and locations later on. Let me ask you a question. Do you think that the reason why the few ships that we do have that have quote unquote gravity wells or gravity, I don't know what you want to call the thing, but it's always a spinning ball, right? Is that something that's supposed to be that connects with us in some type of organic way, that when we see that thing spinning, it makes us feel like something's being generated that's keeping us, you know what I mean, on the floor? Because everything seems to be that type of design, right? It's something that's spinning around and, very quickly.
it looks cool and it gives the player visual feedback. If it weren't spinning, you know, or if it was spinning slower than normal, you know, there's a problem with your gravity generator.
That would be interesting if that's an indicator. Yeah, if it's not spinning quickly or whatever, that's a problem. Yeah. Or as it slows down, the gravity starts to come up. It could be. Yeah. Okay. Cool. I like that.
I would like them though, when they go and do the Nix system. I would love it if they actually gave Delamar its proper gravity, because it would be cool if you're inside of you know, you're inside of Levski and you want to jump down
and just go.
Like, for people that don't know, there's this market at Levski called the Grand Barter, and you enter at the top of it, but you can look down at the, you know, little stalls and things, and it'd be really cool to kind of just like jump over the rail and sort of float down to the yeah.
That would be. That'd be kind of cool. All right. Let's see. What's our next one here? Oh, fiction. Faster than light rescue beacons. Star Citizen includes technology where a distress signal can be sent across vast interstellar distances almost instantly, allowing for immediate rescue responses.
Yeah. And so in reality, any form of communication, especially across interplanetary or interstellar distance, would still be bound by the speed of light or slower, making immediate rescue beacons pretty much impossible.
Which is very true.
Yeah, you'd have to be close to that beacon to get it anytime soon.
Yeah. And it's funny because I think that, I hate to say this, but in the world that we live in these days, I hate to think it, but I think that maybe people don't understand that thing about distance and the speed of light. And I think that they actually would think that that's probably how it really would work. I don't know. You know, I hate to, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's that schools aren't teaching us the way they used to, or they don't teach us at all.
Yeah, I wonder how
people.
This is where I think games could come in, Griff.
Well, oh yeah, if it was done right?
Yeah.
But but see, if you do it right.
I wonder how many people know today that the sunlight from the sun takes 9 minutes to reach Earth, and
that's what I mean.
Yeah.
And then we talk about stuff being a time sink. It's like, y'all ain't seen a time sink yet. You know,
Yeah.
You know, if they really scaled this the way it would be, you know, it would. I want to think about it. But I was just wondering about that. That's all. There's another one here, fastcart. Another one about FTL. Why don't you hit that one?
FTL communication spectrum. The game's lore features real-time communication over vast interstellar distances achieved through an FTL communication network called Spectrum, a sort of interstellar internet.
Right. So, first of all, I want to address Luke's strike, because he brought up quantum entanglement. And the problem with quantum entanglement is that it doesn't allow for communication. And the reason is that you cannot know the state of so basically think of it like two dice. You roll one dice, the other dice is the same thing. So you roll a 2, the other dice is a 2. That's quantum entanglement. You have no control over what the dice comes up with. You can't control whether it's a 2 or a 6 or a 4. Therefore, there's no communication involved. You can't use it for communication for that reason.
Break it down in layman's terms a little bit more.
Yeah, so quantum entanglement requires a measurement, right? And it's fascinating, right? So you have two particles that become linked, so that the state of one particle instantly reflects the state of another. And it doesn't matter what distance is between them. And there have been plenty of experiments all over the Earth. I think they're going to try one in space at some point. But it doesn't allow for faster than light communication, because the particles that are connected, when you try to measure one, it doesn't send any useful information to the other. Right? So there's no way to know the state of the particle on Mars unless you were to get a signal back from Mars, right? Which you can only send at the speed of light. That's the other thing, right? So again, if you're rolling a dice, right, pick your kind of dice. It could be a D&D dice, right? The other one is going to automatically resolve to that, but you can't
Predict it, right? You
what
can't pick it.
number that dice is going to roll. So that way there's no communication. And you can't do on off, like Morse code even. Yeah, you can't because the state, you can't show what state that is before you've actually measured it. If that makes any sense, right? And it would also violate a principle of physics called causality, and I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. But yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you didn't read the fact part of this one.
Oh yeah. So getting to the fact part. So the fact is, in reality, communication is limited by the speed of light, meaning it would take years or even centuries to send messages between the stars. So when somebody is watching, Garmin Humble, he would have sent that years ago if he wasn't in the Stanton system. And again, this is done for gameplay reasons because, it would make no sense to have a light delay in game for this type of stuff. And also, you could get around it on Discord when you're talking with your friends instantaneously if somebody's in Pyro and somebody's in Stanton, like somebody mentioned in chat. The other thing about this is that I don't think anywhere in lore, and I'm super into lore, I've ever seen it explained how that works. Because in lore, we don't have faster than light anything. I think they're going to have to retcon that and, use some hand wavium of creating something like subspace. In Star Trek, they get around it by having a whole other section of space-time where the laws of physics don't quite apply the way they do here.
I mean, I'm mostly disappointed because this means in 900 years in the future, I can get instant cat videos as soon as they're created. I have to wait when we get to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. I know that this subject came up before too, Jade, about in relation to gameplay. I think Togi and I were talking about this the other day. How will they handle communications in the game, you think, when we're crossing one system is one thing, but what happens when someone's in another system?
Yeah.
Are you seeing any way to, other than, like you said, unless they just come up with some ham wavium stuff, is there something?
We don't know. But if I were CIG, I would limit the global chat to that system itself, or maybe even the location.
Yeah.
You're on Microtech, you're only talking to other people on Microtech. This is on servers with, 1,000 people, let's say. So it's not like it would be an empty chat. There would be a lot of people on Microtech at that point. But I think as it becomes more of an MMO, just for practical reasons, you can't have like 10,000 people all in global chat.
Yeah.
So you got to divide it up somehow.
I would foresee this becoming hand wavium because we during IAE 2 years ago, Jack was in Pyro and Jimmy was in Stanton, and Jimmy was watching
on the Moby
Jack's video from his adventures on Pyro.
But did that mean that was in real time?
That's the thing we don't know. I would imagine it'd be close to real time.
Well,
that's
true.
The way it seemed.
True, the way it made it seem, yeah. But I mean, they could do something that puts delay on time. But even then,
as we know now, it's like hand waving. It's close to real time.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, Lucid Strike brought up data runners, and that's another thing, right? So if they don't resolve this lore, then why does data running even exist? If you can send information faster than light, right?
Yeah.
A video is information.
Yeah.
So it's very dense information. It contains a lot more information than a coordinate.
True.
So why would I have to put my coordinates on a flash drive, put them on a ship, and then take it to somebody? So yeah, CIG, I wouldn't want to be you right now.
You're ready to figure it out, right? Yeah, I mean, these are good questions. And I mean, I'm sure that somebody there has sat down and figured out something, whether legitimately or something that's going to be totally fanciful. But we know the communication is going to be vital to the game. And to Jade's point, there's some good and bad to this whole idea of saying communications are limited to that system. Maybe there's going to have to be some other means of communication. To Jade's point, maybe that's when data running does become important. If it's got to go outside of the system, then maybe it's got to be done by a data runner. But if it's in the system, I still wouldn't even have a problem if there was delays in information even then, to be honest with you. It doesn't have to be a substantial delay. I'd like, right, Jay, what is it right now to reach out to Voyager or something? What is the time frame for reaching out and responding back roughly?
Wow.
Do you remember what the time was? I've forgotten what it is, but
you're talking hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely hours.
Yeah, so hopefully 900 years in the future. It's a little bit faster than that, but it's no small task to even do something as simple as that nowadays. And that's very little information being passed backward and forward.
Yeah, I know specifically with New Horizons, the spacecraft that went to Pluto and is now beyond Pluto. It takes 7 hours.
7 hours. See?
So both the Pioneer probes and both the Voyager probes are even further out.
Yeah. Okay. Alrighty, let's keep it.
If you communicate with Mars, would be a few minutes?
You'll take a few minutes, right?
You're talking many minutes, and you wouldn't have a two-way.
Right, that's just one way.
You've seen movies where there's like a two-way video call from somebody on Mars. It won't work like that. You'd basically be sending videograms back and forth.
Back and forth.
Yeah.
And some movies get it right like that, right? They'll say you got a message, and usually that's what it becomes. Just somebody sends a message and you get your message, and then it's like writing a letter more than, like you said, real time back and forth.
Didn't they do that in The Martian? I'm trying to remember.
Yes, they did that in Martian.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Okay, fast death. Fiction. Fast death when exposed to vacuum. In Star Citizen, exposure to space often results in nearly instantaneous death.
Yeah, so in reality, a human would not die instantly. While a vacuum in space is extremely dangerous, a person could survive for about 15 to 30 seconds without permanent damage before losing consciousness due to lack of oxygen. Death would occur after a couple minutes, primarily due to oxygen deprivation. And if you are a fan of The Expanse, and I'm going to spoil it because you should have watched it by now. There's a great scene.
No, don't spoil it. Just give me an example. I know you're talking about.
It's 10 years old almost.
And I'm on season 2. Go ahead.
That's what I'm going to say. Griffin has to finish it.
It won't hurt anything. It won't hurt. Go ahead.
There's a great scene that involves one of the main characters in The Expanse. Oh, can I actually say it, Griff?
Sure, it doesn't bother me.
Yeah, and so basically, she has to go from one spacecraft to another, and she has no suit. And so, what does she do? She goes out the airlock, goes over to the other ship, and she gets messed up, but she survives.
Yep. And it again, I think that we are all influenced by all types of things, like movies, right? People in some movies, like when we've been doing this, watching science fiction from 1903 to now, there are those things that filmmakers and even science wasn't aware of in the early days. They were just taking a shot at what they thought it would be like, right? They maybe had some theory. And then over time, they start to realize, after we've gone into space and after we've done some things, they say, oh, well, now we know exactly how it's done. And I know that there have been people who think that automatically there would be this instant death because of the way we create drama, you know what I mean, in a film when something happens. I always remember the first time I saw it was in 2001. The sequence when Dave Bowman has to get from the pod back into the ship, and he decides to, use blast the door open and allow the atmosphere to push him into the other ship, and he's holding his breath until he can get in there. And I remember seeing it was a very tense scene when I saw that, and I always wondered, is that really what would happen, if you did something like that? And we've seen other films where things like this have happened, where people have had to go into space for a few minutes or whatever, and even underwater for that matter, in the abyss. The abyss, yeah. So it is an interesting fact here.
I just want to
let me ask you one other question before you go. What about temperatures and radiation? Are those factors, and is it dependent upon where you are?
You mean as far as the time of how long it takes to die?
If you're exposed in space, yeah.
I mean, you don't want to be exposed to high or very low temperatures, and space has both of those. If you're in sunlight, you're exposed to very high temperatures. If you're in shadow, you're exposed to very low temperatures. But again, That's going to come after you've died from asphyxiation.
Okay, gotcha.
Right. So you see sci-fi where people immediately freeze.
Right.
That's also sci-fi, right? Because especially if you see them in the sunlight, they wouldn't freeze like that because because they'd be more likely to like have their blood boil and So there there's. What I like about The Expanse is that is as close to hard sci-fi as you can get, right? And so little details like that, he got right in the books, and the TV series did too.
Okay.
Oh, and I was going to say, CIG changed it, because I remember when I first became a backer in 2016, if you went out onto the pads at Port Alzar without a spacesuit, instantly died.
Right.
It didn't need
Right. There was no breathing, no time frame.
There was
You
no
went
time. So
straight
they did
down.
give us, I think, like 7 or 8 seconds now. But
They
it
give-
still should be longer.
Hey, listen, they gave me some time because one day this is when the docking collars weren't working, and I was getting out of my hull C at a pad, to run inside, and I didn't have my helmet on when I went out. And thankfully, as soon as I hit that ramp, I had an oxygen pin, hit myself in a ramp inside. I was like, oh God, I'm so glad I had that oxygen pin on me,
Yeah.
But it bought me just enough time to be able to survive that, And I can't mention, there have been other times too when I've gotten out of a ship, which is the worst. You get out of a ship that has an animation and you're already suffocating when you're getting out. And it's like, oh God. Anyway.
Yeah, and you don't want to be exposed to radiation because it's not good for your DNA.
Right.
No one told me how morbid this episode is going to be. What's up? What's going on?
Hey, death of a spaceman.
There you go.
We're getting into the gory details.
Speak up. All right, FC, this one's on you.
Fiction, regeneration, and Star Citizen regeneration technology allows characters to recover from severe injuries or even death, significantly diverging from real-world science. This includes transferring consciousness to a new, fully grown body, regrowing limbs and organs, and rapidly healing critical injuries. And mechanical or cybernetic components like limbs and stuff too.
Yeah. So regeneration. Okay, we know this. While medical science is exploring regenerative medicine and cloning, it is far from achieving such feat.
Yeah.
That is not to say that in 900 years that we won't be able to do something like that. And there's a lot of research into things like regenerative, being regenerative medicine, or even growing a whole body like a clone. And there's a lot of research into consciousness, what it is. Is it something that could be transferable? These are questions that we have today that who knows where we'll be in 900 years, but for now, this one is firmly science fiction.
Yeah. And this whole aspect of regeneration has been tweaked and shifted a little bit from when Chris Roberts first brought up the whole thing of death of a spaceman. I'm not sure if it's going to continue if it's going to be the way it is now. We still don't know about this whole thing about DNA degeneration, how long you'll get to live, things of that nature, what impact trauma can have on our bodies in the game. But for now, just take advantage of it because it's all hand wavium. But I don't think we're anywhere near this these days. It'll be a while before we get anywhere near something like this.
Not just that, the combination of you passing away in one system and respawning in Stanton. That data has to transfer, so it should take hours, or depending on how far away you are from your own system, maybe years before you wake up in real life, because of the data transfer limit.
Yeah, and we were talking about dense data, videos being very dense
let alone
data.
The brain. Oh my God.
Yeah, let alone your consciousness and every single, atom of your body and where it was. And
and imagine if you get a bit wrong and you misremember something or something, or bite wrong or whatever,
Yeah, and
communication errors.
In lore, we got this from the Vandal.
Yeah, that's
So,
true. That's true. That's true. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So they again, they are not just monsters. They actually do have some form of science and technology.
Yeah, they ain't no joke. Let's talk about these for a little bit, guys. I just want to get some top of the head thoughts about this. And we talked a little bit about the last one for pushing the future. If we were looking 900 years down the road, this argument or this conversation has come up before about things like ballistics or energy weapons. Pro, con, yes, no, some form of it, but different, not at all. What do you guys think when it comes to like ballistic weapons? Do you think that that would be something that would be far removed at this point? And I know there's a whole lot of other dynamics about when we talk about war and combat, whether there would even be human interaction in it, whether it be computers, drones, whatever. But this idea of ballistics, and is it just a gamified thing, you guys think, or do you think that there would still be somewhere in the future a need for some type of ballistic weapon?
I can address this if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yeah, so force equals mass times acceleration is still a thing 900 years in, because it's a fundamental principle of physics, right? One of the things that I always laugh at about like alien invasion movies, most of them, is that they come down in ships with laser beams, and they're blowing up the White House, right, with the lasers. But like that's so inefficient. You could just fling rocks down and have the same level of destruction. And that's literally a ballistic, right? So a ballistic is an object that's traveling really fast and can do a lot of damage. The faster it's traveling, the force, the acceleration, it is, that's what allows it to do a lot of damage, the mass and, the acceleration.
Yeah. Okay.
In my opinion, Texas will always have ballistics, even 900 years in the future. New Texas will use ballistics too. Guns are easy to make, and bullets are easy to make. I don't see that becoming any different. Maybe they'll have some kind of non-lethal thing more often than we have now, but I don't see guns going away. My question is like how efficient batteries will become, especially 900 years in the future, even 10 years in the future.
Let's start me on this one. Well, a radio thermo electric generator is sort of a form of battery. We have those in the Mars rovers, Curiosity and Perseverance, as well as in the Voyager spacecraft. That's why they're still alive after how long? Like, the 70s, I think, was when they were launched, right? They're still alive because they're running on a nuclear battery. And there's research right now into small nuclear batteries, something that could fit in your phone. That would power it for 50 years. You'd never have to charge your phone again.
I don't know how I feel about having. I mean, nuclear means radiation, right? So you have a nuclear phone in your pocket.
No. So nuclear can mean radiation.
There's different levels of radiation.
Yeah, there's different levels of radiation, and there's different ways of shielding against harmful radiation. And so they're not going to sell a phone that's going to give you cancer. Yeah. But I also don't think they're going to sell a phone that you're not going to have to charge for 50 years, because why would you ever buy another phone?
Not buy another one. Yeah.
Jade, the questions come up before in the game about nuclear. Why don't we have nukes or anything like that in the game? Could you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so there are no nuclear weapons in Star Citizen, and I know all you A2 and A1 are saying, what? But I thought they were nukes. No, they are not nukes. They're the equivalent, a future equivalent to what we have today, which is called a fuel air explosive or a thermobaric bomb. If you watched the Russian war in Ukraine, unfortunately, Russia has used thermobaric bombs in Ukraine. They're highly destructive, but they are not nuclear bombs. The reason we don't have nuclear weapons in Star Citizen is because they have something even more deadly than a nuclear weapon. If you can imagine that. And that is an antimatter bomb. Right? Antimatter bombs, we as civilians in the game have no
access to them.
But the military has them. And the reason that they like them and they prefer them over nuclear weapons, number one, you take matter and antimatter, It's very efficient. It's a very deadly explosion, but
Yep.
there's also no radiation left over, no harmful radiation. So there's no fallout from something like that, right? But the other reason, I'll just give you some hardcore math. Russia made the largest nuclear bomb ever called the Tsar Bomba, and it had a yield of 50 megatons of TNT. So that's 50 million tons of TNT. And this was a big, huge bomb, right? But if you took 1 gram of antimatter and had it mixed with 1 gram of normal matter, you get 43 megatons. So literally the equivalent of that Tsar Bomba you could hold in your hand if you had an antimatter bomb.
Yeah. Okay. And then
let's hope we never create anything like this. I know the U.S. Air Force did some research back in the early part of the century on this very thing of like being able to, generate and store safely antimatter for antimatter munitions. I hope we never come to that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, and then lastly, we were talking about this a little bit earlier about the physical and mechanical interactions in the game, and just the fact that we do have these switches and dials and all these things in the game. And in the future, what would you guys want to see? Do you think that we'll still have those type of things when it comes to our ships and stuff like that? Or do you think that there'll be less, or dependent upon the type of ship? What do you guys think?
In my opinion, I think cheap ships will always be viable and have a market for cheap ships, and those cheap ships will have mechanical and dials and
so when you say cheap
and stuff like that.
Let me move away from cheap. Can I just move away from the word cheap? And the reason why I'm saying that, yeah, exactly. And the only reason why I'm saying that is because cheap often means something for some people that's busted and doesn't work either. It's low grade quality.
Work in this sense, because that's why both work in this sense, because it could be cheap in that it's like low quality, or cheap that it's inexpensive. But there'll always be a market for what's the inexpensive car that people get or your first vehicle, maybe like a 16 or 20-year-old will be getting their first spaceship, and they'll later on move up to get something more advanced.
Okay. Jade?
Yeah, I take the opposite view, because like in real life, there's technology that has been replaced by other technology, no matter how cheap it is. If you buy a phone just about anywhere in the world, like a smartphone anywhere in the world, you don't have a physical button pad, right? We're all basically using glass. So, and that's, I don't know, how long was that? Like 20 years?
It took a while, for standardization. I know what you're saying. But when standardization lifts to a certain point, then all competition moves to that same place. There is a transition period, right?
Yeah.
Where, I remember back when we had the rotary dial like this, and then we had the push buttons, and both existed together. But eventually, that rotary thing disappeared, right? And then everything became push button. Same thing to your point when it comes down to digital phones. Technology eventually levels off at some point, and then there's another push forward, at some point.
And I could bring up another example of this, and it would leave room for something like Drake, right? Is cars, automatic transmissions versus manual. People have to go out and specifically buy a manual transmission car, right? Yeah. So if you want to fly a Drake ship, you could, but like the reality in the 30th century would be that most ships aren't Drake ships. Yeah.
There is a side to that does lean a little bit into lore, where CIG talked about how the ships that are less expensive, you may have a situation where parts are more available for them versus high-end ships where I've got to actually put an order in at origin to get the part, right? Or something like that. There could be some hand wavium done there that kind of justifies or makes the like people like me, like Jade and I, may be willing to wait for that part or need that part, whereas somebody else who's more of a different type of player might decide to go with not a MISC ship, because I don't want to say MISC, but let's say MISC and Drake. Those parts may be much more accessible and easier to get. Maybe the parts that we get cost more money, right? But they give a different level of performance. There are things that CIG can do to kind of make that walk with lore a little bit, but not to the point where it becomes inhibitive to gameplay for us. But I would like to feel that difference. I really would. I would like to feel that, you know, when I've got to replace something on a 600i, I've got to pay a little bit more for it, you know, versus if I get into another ship, I don't have to pay as much for that, you know, but that's economics and all the other stuff that they could do.
Let me end on, this is Chris Roberts' game, and Chris Roberts seemed to like putting mechanical stuff in the ships and in the vehicles and what have you. So I don't think we're getting away from that too much in the game.
But I think I don't even think it's a matter of that fastcart about wanting to put mechanical. I think it has more to do with gameplay. I don't think it's aesthetic at all. Not personally. Because if you look at games like what's the thing where Jade, the NFT game we look at?
It's Star Atlas.
Star Atlas, yeah. Star Atlas has a couple ships in there by manufacturers where there's no physicality in the ship at all. It's completely the year 9000. Yeah, it's like the year 9000, right? And I've seen that ship, and now mind you, there's a cool factor to that. There's a real serious cool factor to it. My question becomes, when I see that ship, it looks great, but it's like, okay, is it something I'm going to talk to, or is it something that's going to only have like 2 or 3 buttons? If I need to if I get in a combat situation, how will I control it? Will it have AI? It raises a whole bunch of other questions for me, but you know, they could incorporate something like that into the game. I think that it has to be still interactive for me as a player. I don't want to just sit there and stare out the window, and it does everything as a player. You know, not as an explorer, I might enjoy that a little bit more, but again, for players, I think that there still has to be some feeling of that you had something to do with what's going on, other than me just speaking to the ship. That would be cool. I would love it as a mode even that I want. Like if I want to go into like a automatic navigation thing, and I could tell my system to do something like that, and I could go back in the back and sit back with you guys. I would love something like that, you know. But remember how originally the landing sequence in the game was going to be a landing sequence. You were going to just call to land, and then you were just going to sit there and land. You know, it's been okay, but people complained about it in Starfield. People complained because they really wanted to have that feeling of landing and bringing their ship in, and it worked.
Not everybody wants to do that. There should be a choice.
Exactly.
It should all be about choices. Yes, it is. It is Chris Roberts' game.
Yep.
But beyond chips, I look at things like simple things like, why don't we have a key fob app on our mobi-glass, right?
Yeah.
Why can't we control the lighting in our hangar or in our hab from our mobi-glass? Because I can do all those things right now from my iPhone.
How about opening the back of your ship up when you want to put a vehicle in without having to get out and run and push the button and run back to the vehicle? Like this little remote, open my door, you know?
I mean, if I want to turn on the light, why can't I just clap on and clap off?
Oh God, fastcart! You know Jay does not know what you're talking about. Why do you go back that far?
I just roll with whatever.
Why do you go that far back in the clock? Oh God! But you could have said Google Voice or something, or you could have said Siri. You don't. You go all the way back to clap on, clap off. Okay, go ahead, Jade. I'm sorry.
I was going to say the game has to have believability.
Yeah.
But that also runs to, again, is it believable that 900 years in the future we've lost the technology to open your car door from your phone or to dim the lights in your room from your phone, which is your mobi-glass in Star Citizen?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. And there are other things that they could do to build into the game too. They could build in those things so that as I progress, I could even get those features, you know what I mean, to my ship or to my whatever, so that if I want to use that as a part of the economic side of it, an upgrade, basically, I want to get that new autopilot thing, the HAL 10,000 and put it in my ship. I don't have to do it. I would love that. But I agree with you. I think the idea of always giving us the options is always a good thing to do in the game. And that way you get both sides of the players that like to do either or. Or both for that matter.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about verisimilitude. Does this universe feel futuristic enough for the year that we're in? And a lot of people argue over that. And I tend it seems to be a much more nearer future than the far future that it's cast as, and is is it fun, right? Because it's a game. It has to be
Right.
fun.
Right.
That's it.
Yep. It's an interesting balance. Interesting balance. Okay. Let's see. Do we have any questions? We don't have any questions with all that science and stuff. We don't have any questions. We do have one other thing here. And I just want to toss us into, this is the challenge, not to my panelists that are here, my co-hosts that are here, but it is to you guys. And it's about the thought. Star Citizen is more of a living sci-fi movie than a hardcore realistic space sim. It wants to include enough realism to lend the feeling of verisimilitude and suspension of disbelief, but not so much that it lets realism get in the way of fun. Now, that's a tough space to be in. Because fun is still a relative term. There are some people that fun is sitting in their ship for 2 weeks to get to one system. That's fun for them. For other people, getting there in 2 minutes is what's fun. And so CIG has, and Jade said this earlier, they're in a tough spot with some of these things of trying to balance this game out. And we've said this before on the show, that we know that everything in the game is not going to be something that I'm going to like. I've said this before. I just hope that there's enough in the game that even if I don't like it, I might say, okay, well, I get why they did it. I don't like it, but I get why they did it. But this is going to be a navigation for them to create something that is attractive to a lot of players. It's not going to be attractive to everybody. I can tell you that now. I honestly don't believe Star Citizen is going to be for everybody, but you can say that about any game. But personally, we know that a lot of stuff that's in this game, we've talked about the references, whether they're film references, TV references. Jay was talking about The Expanse earlier. We've talked about Star Trek. We've talked about Star Wars. We've talked about other games that have influenced Star Citizen. We've talked about Eve, Star Wars Galaxies, other games that have had impact on it. So there's kind of a weird gumbo of all these different things that are, we would hope would be the best of these different things, as well as the best of what we could bring in from science. But then there's always those two other areas that have to do with, one, the technology that CIG has to be able to do to pull this stuff off. But then there's also us as players. That's a variable. That's a weird variable that no one can predict whether we are going to really like something or not like something. That is going to be up to us when the final product is out there. And that's when CIG will find out whether or not we like Chris Roberts' idea or whether we don't. We got a question, y'all, believe it or not.
Yep.
Want to read it, fastcart?
Okay, so this is from Sure It's Fun. Let's talk astronomy and Jeopardy. What stellar phenomena should Star Citizen bring in to impose real Jeopardy on the player?
I've got so many,
okay,
but
go ahead, Jade.
No. You go first.
No, I don't have one yet. You go first.
I've got one that they're going to do, and we just haven't seen it yet, at least not to the level that, and it's not a huge one. It's not astronomical, but it does have to do with the reality of what it means to fly ships in the game, particularly from going into atmospheric flight. And I'm not talking about cruising flight, like when you're in a fighter jet. I'm talking about what is it going to take for a fully loaded, reclaimer to take off in space, or when it's landing, the fuel consumption, how much is it going to burn, wear on engines, things like that. The reality of what it means, we see it and it seems like it's no big deal, but I'm looking forward to seeing, like, when I make a decision, is it worth going down to this planet because it's going to take a lot for me to go down there and a lot for me to come up? Or is it better for me to get in some small ship and fly down? I'm looking for mass, gravity, all that stuff, inertia, all that type of science fiction stuff that has an impact on my ship. Even when CIG talked about cargo a few weeks ago, and they talked about having to even load your ship a certain way because of weight and balance, that's the type of stuff, the real physics dynamics of the game they start introducing. I'm curious to see where they're going to go with that. Go ahead, Jade.
Okay, so there's a number of things, but I'm going to start with because Gomab and chat mentioned solar flares. And we are getting solar flares.
Yeah, we're getting those. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're getting CMEs and pyro. But one of the things I would love for them to do, this isn't, well, I mean, it helps you not be in jeopardy.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I'd love for them to do is illustrate it on the star map where the CME is, because it should propagate through the system slowly. So if you're on an outer planet, right, and your friend just said, "Hey, I just had a CME on Monox Pyro 2, and you're out there on Terminus, right? Which is at the very end of the system. You know, okay, the solar flare is coming, and I want it to dissipate, right? Just like it would in real life. So the closer you are, to the star, it's going to have much more of an impact than if you're further away, because it's dissipating, and you have the inverse square law and things like that. So that would be cool for a number of reasons. It also would mean that places that are closer to a star, while they may be more habitable, they also, as a flare star like that, they'll also be in more jeopardy. So if you're on that beautiful planet in Pyro called Bloom, Pyro 3, you're going to be more danger in that on that planet than if you were on Terminus, right? So I like that, because then people would have to choose, do they want to have to put up with these solar flares as much, if they settle here on this planet versus another one? All about basically making people have to make choices about where they want to be and for how long. The other thing would be exposure to radiation. So just being exposed to different forms of radiation isn't enough for me. It's also how long you're exposed to it, right? So I would like them to put in different forms of radiation. In space, we have all kinds of things. We have cosmic rays, we have gamma rays, we have X-rays, right? So all these things are really bad for the human body, and things like that. Also related to solar flares, it's not a harmful thing, but I would love it if we had aurora, right? So like you're on Bloom, and there was a solar flare, but you're on the night side of it, right? So cool. You're not getting the impact, the bad impact from the solar flare. Maybe you see a beautiful aurora, right? That we call them the Northern Lights. That would be cool. It would look really cool. I'm sure the VFX people at CIG are probably like, "Oh no!"
But it would be.
Yeah, I would love that.
It would be. It would be very cool. Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
I'm going to be real.
Sure.
I'm going to be real quick. I'm just going to say I'm looking forward to having Tamsa in Star Citizen. Because I don't know if people know this, but Tamsa is where the black hole is.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting, because I mean, I probably will try to go into the system. I'm not going to get too close. We don't know how close it's too close, but I'm going to try to risk it and something that's expendable. But outside of astronomical dangers, I'm looking forward to seeing the Boreal Stalker, the Whip Crab, and the Sandworm. I know that's not as astronomical, but yeah, I'm looking forward to those two.
Okay.
Yeah, I would also like to see, and we saw something in the vertical slice for Squadron 42 that gave me some hope we might get this, but meteor showers.
Yeah. Even the coil, I'm excited about that. Even having to navigate through things like that.
Yeah,
the meteor showers, that would be cool, boy. And in the lore, they even talk about how the Endeavor is supposed to be designed to withstand a meteor shower, which is interesting. Yep. Yeah. Okay. All righty. Well, we have gotten through the pseudoscience, fact and fake today. And I really want to give a special thanks to Jade, who put in all the hard work. For those of you who weren't here earlier, I talked about how normally we put these shows together ahead of time, but Jade gave me so many wonderful suggestions for topics today that 90% of the show, if not 95, was all about what she suggested. So Jade, thank you again. I think it was all very informative, and people were chatting about all this stuff today. So hopefully we didn't scare you guys away from the fake side of Star Citizen.
You're welcome.
Jade, I would applaud for you, but I'm afraid I might activate my clapper. So I'm just letting you know.
Do you really have one of those things?
Oh, God.
No.
Oh, God. Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, before we go, we do have something special that we want to do today. As you guys know, on this past week. We lost one of the great actors, one actors that I've enjoyed for many, many years. James Earl Jones passed away at the age of 93. And even though most of us are very familiar with him from things like The Lion King or his voice of Darth Vader in the Star Wars series, his career was much broader and bigger than that. And some of you guys know that. So what we're going to do is just do a very quick tribute to him. This is from E! It was on this past week, and hopefully you guys will enjoy it. And then we're going to wrap up the show afterwards. So let's take a quick look at it.
If you only knew the power of the dark side.
I find the bad guys are often interesting. You know, since Darth Vader, I guess I've still exploring that energy in myself.
I am your father. I tied my own shoes once. It is an overrated experience.
All over the world, people respond to coming to America. You know, oh, you're the king, chauffeur. You know, it's not the grand, complicated work that gets the attention. It's